Also, yoga is very rooted in the cycles of the moon. You don't do a physical practice on a full moon day because the energy's too high and you could hurt yourself. So you would practice a yin, a slow practice on that day. I would always observe that. And initially my students would be like, oh, but I really don't feel like doing that today. And then they'd get into that and go, oh yeah, it's a full moon today, isn't it? So it's yin today. I really get what you mean about that. I've seen research that shows that admissions go up on a full moon, and awful things like domestic violence and murder happen more on a full moon.
So lots is going on for you in terms of teaching and certain therapeutic methods that need restructuring, and your approach to leadership and your presence in teaching. I'm happy to go through some of that with you. I'd like to talk to you as well about the astrological zodiacal cycle of the soul and hypnotherapy, because I see that there are some correlations there. I'd really like to discuss that with you. But first of all, I want to welcome you back. You are the mountain climber of the soul. Your quiet persistence moves mountains while others merely talk about them. And I think in the world of shortcuts, you've honored the steep path. And those of us who understand the true power of your Capricornian heart have been waiting for your return. The summit has been the most dedicated seeker.
Peter, it's so wonderful to be talking to you again, because it brings everything together when I talk to you. All the strands come together. It really is incredible. Gives me tingles in my crown chakra. So there we go.
I've been exploring the Zodiac as a map of soul development, and I see really interesting parallels with why people seek hypnotherapy. And this is a hypothesis I'm exploring. Most people see the Zodiac as you're a Capricorn, you're a Gemini, you're a Pisces. I don't see it like that. I see it as a journey from the initial impulse of Aries, like when the sperm meets the egg, or when the impulse of a seed comes in, the impulse of Aries, to Pisces, and we evolve into each sign. I see some interesting parallels as to why people seek hypnotherapy. As we journey through each of the 12 signs, they represent different aspects of the human experience. Hypnotherapy helps us access those deeper layers of consciousness where transformation can occur. What really fascinates me is how the Zodiac represents a spiral of growth rather than just a circle. Each time we visit certain themes in our lives, we have the opportunity to approach them with greater awareness. I find this is similar to how hypnotherapy works, because we revisit challenging experiences, but with the expanded perspective that the hypnotic state provides.
By that point, the brain is at a point where it can look at that experience with emotional distance, so it can learn from it rather than being in it.
Hypnotherapy helps us reframe our experiences through symbolic understanding rather than literal interpretation. I'm particularly drawn to the concept of the transitions between signs. So from Pisces to Aries, this is the dissolution of the self followed by rebirth. This reminds me of the hypnotherapeutic process, where we often need to release old patterns before establishing new ones. Would you agree that many people come to hypnotherapy at this exact juncture, seeking to break cycles and begin anew?
Yes, absolutely, Peter. That is 100%. In an initial consultation with a lady yesterday who is at that point where she's unhappy with her weight, but she refuses to buy any more clothes. So all her clothes don't fit. She can't regulate her weight. She can't understand why what she's been doing in the past is no longer working. So she is absolutely at that point where things need to be broken down and looked at, like you say, before she can transition into the next stage of her life, where she'll be incredibly successful, more successful, happier, but she'll be doing things differently. And that's good, absolutely.
In terms of this ongoing research, I was reading I can't remember what the resource was, but it mentioned the river of forgetfulness that the soul crosses before incarnation. It made me wonder, with your practice of hypnotherapy, whether that serves as a bridge back across that river, helping us recover soul memories and purpose that were obscured when we
Yes.
entered this life. And maybe that's why many people instinctively seek hypnotherapy, to reconnect with something they've forgotten but deeply need.
Absolutely. Couldn't describe my journey better. It's not necessarily getting to something new. Sometimes it's getting to something very old that we had maybe as a very young child, but the material world has caused us to put so much over the top of it. Peeling back, again, for me, that was absolutely what happened. I dismantled everything and got right back to nothing almost before I was like, yes, this is who I am. This is how I used to feel as a child. This is how my mum used to tell a good way to be. This is how she felt about the world. And this is good. I don't need to cover it up. And I don't need to pretend to be anything different. I think now I've found that confidence because what I do is completely rooted in neuroscience. It has given a vessel to everything that you're saying from the spiritual world into the material world in a way that people who are not yet spiritually awakened can understand. They can get hold of that. But what they're doing without realizing it is exactly what you're saying. They're stripping back to that spiritual being, that life purpose, that innate joy and happiness. When we are back to that more innate state, that's how we feel. It's a conduit to get to those people who wouldn't accept it from a spiritual point of view yet.
Beautiful. Another thing I was looking at was, this is a fascinating area for me, and I hope it will be for you too. I see the potential correlation in the realm of timing and natural cycles. From an astrological perspective, I can observe that human beings are deeply influenced by natural rhythms. The daily cycle of the sun, lunar phases. Interestingly, there was research where archaeologists found bones from the Paleolithic era where women had etched into the bones the lunar cycles to gauge their menstrual cycles.
Yes. We had the wisdom, didn't we, Peter?
Exactly.
We had it all there and we covered it all up. It's like the Romans bringing over hot water pipes and all of these lovely things. And we went, do you know what? Why? Oh, no, let's go back to living in the dirt and the dark. We've done that with our sixth sense, with our spirituality, with our soul. We've covered it all up. My granny, who was very psychic, very in touch and saw and felt things everywhere she went, she always used to say, everyone has these abilities. It's just that the telephone and the computer and everything has covered them up. And actually, I don't know if you've heard of a lady called Laura Lynn Jackson. She's a psychic, she's a medium, but she's been through rigorous scientific testing. She's had her brain looked at, been through rounds of psychic readings and medium readings and had it looked at by scientists. She says, we all have this. It's been scientifically proven. This isn't a woo thing, whether you like to think of it as an aura or an energy field, it is there. If you're not acknowledging and tapping into it, you are missing out on this huge guiding force, which is so beautiful and helpful.
Scientists seek to discover what the mystics already know.
Absolutely.
Right. And this is why I think the influence of natural rhythms, because I'm not looking at a belief system here, I'm looking at knowledge. Beliefs are only necessary when knowledge is absent. I don't need to believe that gravity exists. It's a fact. It exists. I don't need to believe that the sun releases solar flares. It does that. It's fact. So for me, these are not beliefs. This is knowledge. These things exist. As you're rightly alluding to, we've covered those things up. And because we're influenced by these natural rhythms, the daily cycle of the sun, monthly lunar phases, and seasonal shifts all affect our psychology and physiology in measurable ways. And there's been recent chronobiology research that's confirmed that many of these cosmic cycles correlate with human biological rhythms. So the study showed altered sleep patterns during full moons,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Seasonal effects on neurotransmitter levels, and even correlations between birth season and certain psychological traits. I'd love
That's
to know
fascinating.
from your clinical
Mm.
experience, have you noticed that hypnotherapy effectiveness can vary based on timing factors? Do clients seem to respond differently at certain times of day or days of the week or seasons?
That's a really interesting point, Peter. And I think the first thing that comes to mind about that is, and I used to notice this in my personal training business and yoga business, is that there will be weeks where everybody will cancel or everybody will have an event happen to them or everybody can't make it for some reason. And I notice it in my businesses. There'll be phases, and that's why what you've just said is really fascinating to me. I would think something's going on this week because everybody's cancelling. No one's quite right. Somebody's having a tantrum. That makes complete sense. And I notice it with my hypnotherapy business. It'll be that things will come in waves, or I'll find that there'll be particular themes. I'll pick one particular language pattern to use with my clients in their trance. And I'll use it for one person at the beginning of the week. And I'll just find that I want to use it for everybody throughout the week because the same theme is coming up, whether it's with a man, a woman, a child, it'll all be the same kind of emotional wave. I can see how that makes a lot of sense when you're looking at both of the businesses that I've run.
How many times a year does this happen?
Oh, I'd say it probably is 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 times. When you think of the seasons, and the movement of nature, that fits very well, doesn't it? Also, yoga is very rooted in the cycles of the moon. You don't do a physical practice on a full moon day because the energy's too high and you could hurt yourself. So you would practice a yin, a slow practice on that day. I would always observe that. And initially, my students would be like, oh, but I really don't feel like doing that today. And then they'd get into that and go, oh, yeah, it's a full moon today, isn't it? So it's yin today. I really get what you mean about that. I've seen research that shows that admissions go up on a full moon and awful things like domestic violence and murder happen more on a full moon. It's really nice that once I'd educated my clients on that, they were like, oh, yeah, we get it. And they were all moving on this wave of full moon. They'd all come in and go, oh, it's a full moon today. So it's this, or it's a half moon today. They got really into it and they really enjoyed it after that. And they felt the benefit of that moving with nature.
That's fascinating. In astrological practice, I observe that certain planetary transits, like the moon Neptune aspects, the moon is about your emotions, your deep emotional life, your emotional body. And Neptune rules Pisces, which is the planet of the dreamer. It can be about illusions. It's a very dreamy, watery planet. When you have moon Neptune aspects, that could correlate with increased receptivity to subtle influences. I'm wondering, from your perspective, are there identifiable factors that predict when a client will be more receptive to hypnotic suggestion?
That's a really interesting question, Peter. I certainly encourage clients to come at their most receptive time. So if they've got a really busy schedule and they're like, oh, I have to squeeze it in the evening, I'm always like, is the evening a good time for you? How do you feel in the evenings? And they're like, come to think of it, actually, I'm not great in the evenings. It would be better if I came before work, or I'll do an online session in my lunch break, because I think people don't, again, in this kind of material push forward world, people don't always think about when is easiest for me to do this, because ultimately when it's easiest is when, as you said, they are going to be most receptive because their brain will be at its most relaxed. And when the brain is relaxed, that's when it works at its best. And of course, taking that onto a deeper level, that's when they're closest to their innate abilities and able to tap in to their inner knowing much more. Of course, they don't realize all of this. For me, what's great is I can put it in a scientific, matter of fact way, when really, in my mind, I'm very much working with actually when is this person at their most receptive? And if they come and you feel like you're pushing against a brick wall, that's when I'll say, I don't think this is a great time of day for you. I think we need to look at coming at a different time. And of course, that helps them start to tap in, whether they realize it or not, to that inner knowing of when's a good time of day for me? When am I at my most receptive? And when am I feeling most able to learn? Because we just plow through without noticing that. So I think that's how it would play in my practice for me, Peter.
That's an interesting correlation as well. You're absolutely right. Your term plowing through, we don't educate ourselves on the subtler influences. We don't recognize that. And then we get surprised when something happens and we can't explain it. There's another interesting correlation I'd like to explore with you. As an example, in astrology, what we observe is when transiting planets make a harmonious aspect to a person's chart. It could
Yes.
be Mercury or Neptune. They often experience heightened intuition and receptivity. So I wonder if we were to track and evaluate hypnotherapy outcomes against such transits, I wonder if we might discover optimal windows for intervention.
It's very interesting you saying that, because often people will say, oh, I've had your number for 6 months or 18 months in one lady's case. It has to be at the right time. Things have to come together, whether that's the problems had to get worse, so it's put you in a place of increased receptivity because you're seeking that. So that's very interesting. And it would be fascinating to see that. And I'm 100% sure it would correlate. I don't know if you ever listened to the Huberman podcasts, Andrew Huberman. That's another fantastic way where he gets information across, which is very scientific, but again, it is tapping back in to our primitive being. Things like get out in the sunshine between 7 and 9 in the morning and face the sun, so that your body is told what time of day it is and your cortisol spikes at the right time. Somebody getting out and being in the sun, of course, there's so much of a deeper benefit to being outside in the morning and being around nature. I see all these amazing people bringing this stuff into the world in so many different ways, but encouraging people to tap back into that natural cycle and feel rather than just do.
That's why I love having these conversations, especially with you, because you're open, you're receptive, you're willing to explore these things with an open mind, which is what I'm asking. Does the idea of optimal timing windows for certain types of psychological work resonate with your clinical observations?
Oh, yeah. And it's something that I'd be very interested to look into more, because if somebody is chronically depressed, when is the best time of day, of month, of the week? That would be fascinating to look at, to help people more with when will this fit in? When's the window going to open where this can come in for you at its best place? It really does, because with what I do, we're helping people relearn or strip back, or is tapping back in to themselves. How can we make your life as easy as possible by going with how your body works, how your brain works? Someone's neurodiverse, if they have ADHD or autism or both, what works best for you? I would be absolutely fascinated to learn more about that and how I could help my clients with particular issues find the best time for them. That would be amazing.
That would be a great body of work to look at, especially if we have the facts that will validate that correlation. The other thing that I was looking at, I love symbology, and I think astrology and hypnotherapy work with symbolic languages to access deeper layers of consciousness. And of course, in astrology, we use planetary archetypes, as in Saturn representing structure and limitation, and Neptune representing dissolution in the unconscious, and Venus embodying values and relationship patterns. But what's fascinating, these symbolic patterns emerge spontaneously in the human psyche, regardless of cultural background. This is something the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung observed with his concept of the collective unconscious. So in your hypnotherapy practice, how important is symbolic language? And do you find that certain types of imagery or metaphors consistently create stronger responses in trance states?
Yeah, it's really important, Peter. You make a good point. Imagery, we have several different sections to our trance. We use an introduction and then a deepener. So then that person is at their most relaxed. And then we do a structured piece, maybe about confidence or achieving a goal. And then we move on to a metaphor. And that is exactly what that metaphor is. It's full of imagery, it's full of symbols, and it's a story. It's just a story. It can be quite a childish story. So one particular one which works really nicely is about trees, where a little tree is teaching the big tree that you can let go and your roots are going deep so you can sway in the breeze. And then the big tree realizes he can see all the way to the sea, he can enjoy waving in the breeze, and the little tree is saying you can just let go. So things like trees, like nature. The other one that's lovely that I use a lot is a river. You watch the water flowing. It doesn't have to make an effort. It just winds its way around the rocks, around the obstacles, and that person can let themselves go into that water and move along. Images really predominantly from nature or group activity. So there's another one about people painting together and coming together to paint a picture. But I think my favorite ones are the ones from nature, because they tap into our primitive being. We are part of nature. And that creates a very simple, very relaxing way for people to understand the message, is that imagery and that story is absolutely vital in hypnotherapy. It really is, because the brain accepts that story and learns from it. Whereas if we were sitting there telling people what you need to do is just relax, that is not helpful. But when we tell a story, the brain goes, oh, that's a nice story. Maybe I could do that. Whether we're a 2-year-old hearing a story or a 102-year-old, it still has exactly the same effect. Imagery and metaphors. Yeah.
Wow, that's so illuminating. And you just made me think of something, because it's clear that people respond most powerfully to imagery. I'm wondering is whether the response mechanism to imagery can resonate with prominent planets in their birth chart. As an example, someone with a strong Neptune might respond deeply to oceanic imagery, while someone with a prominent Saturn might connect with imagery of mountains or stable structures. If I was to use a specific methodology, say I'm using a client's birth chart to identify the archetypes that might be most accessible to them during hypnotic states. For instance, if someone has a moon conjunct Neptune, they have natural access to flowing intuitive state, while someone with Mercury Saturn might respond better to structured step-by-step guided imagery.
That's so interesting. That's really fascinating. Yeah.
Could you envision customizing hypnotic language based on knowledge of a client's astrological makeup?
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely fascinating way to go. And what you said about people connecting with certain images, we've been on several holidays recently around places where there are mountains, and my husband cannot get enough of looking at mountains. He could stand there all day and look at them. I said to him, why don't we get some pictures, some paintings of mountains? You're getting such a lot from looking at these mountains. Everywhere we went, we were on Anglesey in Wales, but everywhere we went, he was looking for Snowdonia. He was like, you can see Snowdonia over there. There are the mountains. That links exactly with what you're saying. For him, that's a very powerful image. It's something which touches him deeply. So I'd be fascinated to look at those different images which would resonate more with somebody because of their astrological chart.
I gave a talk at a chiropractor's a couple of weeks back about the axis mundi as the spine, and looking at through astrology, bringing in the physiology, the neuroscience, the nervous system, all of those aspects to it. They were fascinated by the possibilities of explaining certain things. There is skepticism, and many people might question, how does this ancient symbolic system like astrology meaningfully inform a clinical practice? It's a valid question, But what if we reframe the question rather than asking whether planets cause psychological states? What if we consider astrology as a sophisticated pattern recognition system that maps psychological archetypes?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, that's a really good point, Peter, where people understand the language and
Yeah.
see how it correlates. Absolutely.
The other thing is that somebody said to me the other day, there's no way there's any correlation between chiropractic or hypnotherapy and astrology. And I said, what is your foundational reasoning for making
Yeah.
that statement? Because it's usually a very siloed approach. This is part of the problem with our education system. And as a skeptic, I understand they would suggest that adding astrological elements to hypnotherapy risks undermining its clinical credibility. But I could also argue that personalization is key to effectiveness in any therapeutic approach. From your professional standpoint, what are the ethical considerations in integrating complementary frameworks into hypnotherapy?
To be honest, Peter, I know other people who combine hypnotherapy with various other types of therapy. Also, people who have trained in other types of hypnotherapy and are now working, like myself, a solution focused hypnotherapist, who do bring in other elements. I think the only thing you would want to ensure, and astrology wouldn't clash with this, was that you were keeping it solution focused. And astrology obviously is helping to do that because it's helping you find the best time, way, and images for it to be as solution focused as possible, because obviously it's finding the right windows for you. So, really, it's up to the individual if they want to take what they've learnt, for instance, the course that I've done, and they think actually to integrate it in this way would be very useful. And because it can be something that you can offer, and it doesn't mean that everybody has to have that. If they think, I'm not interested in that, I don't want, that's fine. But if somebody might be extremely interested in putting the two together, there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't do that. Absolutely none.
I was talking to somebody about this the other day. And the reason I was speaking to this chap is because he's a skeptic. I really do enjoy speaking with him because he plays devil advocate. So one of the things he said to me in the context of what we're talking about, he said any benefit that comes from astrological insight only really comes from simply having additional information about your client, not from any validity in astrology itself. I thought to myself, okay, that's a valid point. But if I was to ask you, based on that, how important is it, in your view, to understand the specific mechanism by which a technique works versus simply observing that it produces positive outcomes?
I think in my particular branch of hypnotherapy, a lot comes from the education. Rather than telling our clients, you need to go and do this, I educate you on why you're bored and what's happening in your brain when you're bored. I give you exercises to get your brain in a better place. From that aspect, it's very important to a certain degree, depending on the client, really, Peter. I think it really does depend on that, because some clients will want to know everything. For instance, a neurodiverse client would want to know everything and they just keep asking questions. And that's fine because that's giving them what they need. Some people aren't as bothered. If it's working, they don't care how it works. But that foundation of education is what we base what we do on. That's very important. They could have that education, it could make sense, and then they can just forget all about it if they want to, and it can just carry on. With respect to combining astrology, there are plenty of people who would go, if it works, I don't really care how it's working. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling more myself. Let's carry on. So I think there are plenty of people, particularly if it was alongside something which ticked the scientific box also, it could make a really good pairing.
I'm in the throes of writing a book. It's a blend of neuroscience, astrology, somatic work, and psychology. People want to know, am I speaking to a harmonizer? Am I speaking to an alchemist? Am I speaking to the thinker? Am I speaking to the persister? Am I speaking to the rebel? And the astrology informs all of these things. One of the models that I've been looking at, and I've been developing this model with specific planetary archetypes, because I was interested in matching them with corresponding hypnotherapeutic techniques. As an example, moon issues, emotional problems, unconscious needs might respond well to age regression techniques. Mercury challenges, in other words, thought patterns and communication blocks, might benefit from cognitive reframing. Somebody has Mars difficulties with action blocks, anger issues. They might transform through resource state anchoring. I'm curious, from your expertise, how might you evaluate whether such correlations are clinically useful? Would you consider incorporating this type of timing or archetypal information into your practice?
Yeah, I think it would certainly take case studies. Case studies would be an excellent way to do it because you then get to work with someone over a period of time and they're primed to know that you'll be wanting feedback. They're very much on board with the process. So you're not fighting against them or trying to persuade them to do it. You've got somebody there who is going to go along this journey. It can be a trial and error. So I would definitely say that's the way that solution focused therapy is becoming more available because we're validating it with plenty of case studies. We've done a great big case study in the Northumberland Police, for instance. So I definitely think when you can get a group of case studies together and you can use it for an extended period of time, however long that person needs to be seen for, that gives real credibility because you really watch the change in that person. And then you get a real good download of information at the end to show their journey, what the results have been for them. And the differences they notice from how they felt at the beginning to how they felt halfway through and then at the end.
Yeah, fantastic. Case studies are very important. They give you a base, an anchor, and some validation rather than just ideas. At the moment, this is the hypotheses, but I'm starting to see these correlations. In terms of the broader implications of integrating some of these approaches, one of the principles I find compelling is what I call archetypal coherence. What does that mean? It's the idea that certain psychological patterns consistently emerge across different systems, whether we're looking at through an astrological lens, psychological lens, or through hypnotherapy. But in your experience, Keira, with hypnotherapy, have you observed consistent patterns in how the unconscious mind organizes and expresses information? Are there universal themes or symbols that seem to emerge across different clients?
Yes, it's interesting because in relation to that, when I worked with a friend of mine who's helped me with my story message and marketing, he got me to interview some of my old clients. So that really linked to what you were saying, as in themes, and really looking at the biggest theme and the biggest reason that people come to me is fear. These 4 clients that I interviewed, all of different genders and ages, it was fear. Who am I now? What's going to happen to me if I don't solve this problem? I would definitely say that is the biggest theme in my practice, is they've hit a point where they are frightened. They're frightened because they're too reliant on something, or they feel their relationship is slipping away, or they just don't know who they are anymore. And they hit this point where they think, what is happening? I'm really frightened. If you ask any of my clients, they would say that they're frightened about something, whether it's health because they're smoking and they can't stop smoking, or fear of just vanishing into being no one. That's the main theme.
Tell us why people would come to see you, Keira.
So I think if we're talking specifically me as an individual, it is a few different things. It's empathy. Even if they read my website, they'd immediately see, oh, this person's not sitting on an ivory tower. They know what it's like to be in the position in some form that I'm in. And the other one is that I make it very clear from my website that this is an action-driven therapy. It's a short-term therapy, and these are the things I require from you. So I think somebody who was looking to, they really want to solve a problem, and the language that my friend used, and he's used it on my website and in different various places, is to solve their most painful problems. And I think you could probably relate to that, Peter, in your work as a PT and everything you've done after that. People come with the most painful problem, and they might hide it at the start, or they might not really tell you what it is. They might say, well, it's because I don't want to smoke weed anymore. But actually underneath that, there is that fear and that painful problems. It could be manifesting physically as health problems. One lady that came to me was having seizures, which she was told was epilepsy, but then she was told it was stress-induced seizures. Or it might be that they have a goal they want to achieve. So they might want to set up a business or stop drinking or shed unhelpful habits. And that's a big one, because generally they come with one unhelpful habit, but there's actually a whole collection of others that are underpinning it. And when we look at it related to astrology, really what's happening is at that point, they're probably very much going against where they should be, where their soul wants to sit. They've strayed a very long way away from that in one respect or another. And what we help them do is get their brain into a solution focused state, which is just a confident, resilient state, which of course, what happens then is they start putting in boundaries, they start protecting themselves in the right way rather than the wrong way. And of course, linking that back to astrology, they're coming back to the path which nature, the universe, would prefer them to take. And it's interesting because even hardened skeptics who are so skeptical, they're even skeptical about neuroscience, then they adjust to the neuroscience. But then it's so interesting because the language starts to creep in of, this was obviously meant to happen and I was meant to find you, and this has happened now, and it's really good because this has gone out of my life. Even those skeptical people start to talk in a more feeling, like you used the word visceral, which is so accurate. You can feel it in the room. They've started to tap into, that feels wrong, I'm not doing that anymore. And that's when it's, now we're cooking with gas. This is personal to them, and they are making changes which are visceral to them. It's amazing.
Beautiful. And where can people find you, Keira?
They can find me on my website at www.positivechangehypnotherapy.co.uk. There's actually a couple of free resources on there. There's a free 30-minute brain shift guide that people can download, find out a little bit more through that. And that contains a relaxation for them to listen to and a guide of how to use that so they can start to get to grips with how I work with people.
I see you have that incredible ability to register their hidden cry and move them from comfort to capacity and from pathology to process.
Yes, that's such a good way that you describe that. Absolutely, because they just don't know where to start, but they also feel huge amounts of shame. So those two things, you let them off the hook about, you're not broken, your brain's just got in a mess. And then let's find a really manageable step to push you forward. And it's a really magical combination. It really is.
Keira, thank you so much for this fascinating conversation, bridging these two approaches to understanding the human mind. And I trust we've given our listeners plenty to consider about ancient wisdom and modern clinical practice that might inform each other. And if you'd like to learn more about Keira's hypnotherapy work, you can find her contact information in the show notes. And if you're interested in exploring the astrological correlations we've discussed, I offer consultations that specifically focus on identifying optimal timing and approaches for personal development work. Keira, thank you. It's been fascinating.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.